In today's video, we're taking a look back to the 2019 NHL Draft. We've learned a lot about these players as we're ending the third season since their draft year, many of which have had a lot of NHL experience. So we're going to look back and redraft the early part of the first round, and that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're doing a 2019 NHL redraft. So we're taking a look back now that we have all this information of the past 3 years on these players. A lot has certainly changed in what we think of some of these players, how they've performed, how they compare to their NHL draft classmates here. And now we're going to kind of re-rank them and see if we could have a chance to do-over with all this new information. How would they be drafted today? Of course, this is only hypothetical and only for fun, so certainly you're probably going to see players end up on different teams. And like I said, there's nothing to be upset about here. This is strictly based on my opinion, based on their performance in the 3 years since their draft year as of today. If we were to redo this again in a year or 2 or 3 time, I'm sure this is likely going to continuously change over the course of their career. Some of these players certainly continue to improve. Some might regress. Some might stay the same. It's just the way it all goes. Now, before we take a look here at what I feel would be the new draft order, let's take a look at the original draft order. Now, for today, just to keep this video without getting too long, we're going to do the top 15 selections. So let's take a look at the original first round here, which was the New Jersey Devils with the first overall pick, selecting Jack Hughes. Of course, this is kind of known as the Jack Hughes draft. We went into this with the Hughes-Kakko debate for quite several weeks and months ahead of time. And of course, Hughes ended up going first. The Rangers selected next and took Kaapo Kakko. Number 3 was Kirby Dach to the Chicago Blackhawks. The big center iceman went straight to the NHL. Certainly hasn't progressed as much as we originally thought he would based on how he started his career. Some kind of considered Dach going number 3 a little bit of a stretch, but early on at least it was looking like a good selection. Today you'll find him in a different spot. The number 4 pick was the Avalanche. This is one of the picks they got from the Ottawa Senators in the Matt Duchene trade. They selected Byram. LA Kings were up next at number 5, and they selected Alex Turcotte. Detroit at number 6 takes Moritz Seider, who again at the time Yzerman was looked upon as kind of going off the board here a little bit and selecting Seider higher than many had him ranked, but we all know how that's worked out. Seider's turned out to be quite a defenseman. Next, we had the Buffalo Sabres taking Dylan Cozens, who's certainly worked out relatively well. The Edmonton Oilers came up next and selected Philip Broberg out of Sweden. We had the Anaheim Ducks at number 9 taking Trevor Zegras. Zegras has certainly been dazzling the NHL fans and putting on quite a show the past couple of years, and certainly is going to be higher on this list here today when we do the redraft. We have number 10 was the Vancouver Canucks selecting Russian forward Vasily Podkolzin. At number 11, we had the Arizona Coyotes taking defenseman Victor Soderstrom. Number 12, the Minnesota Wild selected Matt Boldy. At number 13, we had the Florida Panthers selecting young goaltender Spencer Knight. It was certainly a high pick for a goalie, but he certainly comes with a high amount of athleticism and pedigree, and looks like he could be a stud goalie for the future. Number 14, we had the Philadelphia Flyers selecting Cam York. And at number 15, we had the Montreal Canadiens selecting Cole Caufield. I think a lot of teams passed on him due to his size, but he has proven to be a pretty good goal scorer here during the last year's playoff run to the Stanley Cup final. And of course, started to slow this year, but under new head coach Marty St. Louis has been thriving and found that connection again with Nick Suzuki and has been playing much better. So that was the original draft order. Now let's also take a quick look here at their performance since the draft and who has the most NHL experience, most points, and kind of do a quick comparison in that regard. Okay, so as you can see, this is the rankings here by point totals from the 2019 NHL Draft, courtesy of HockeyDB.com. Of course, the other slide I use here showing the original draft order, also courtesy of HockeyDB.com. A great resource if you're not already familiar with the site for anything past or present in the NHL hockey world. Now, as you can see, Jack Hughes has been the most productive player so far in this draft with 108 points on 166 games, which is why he's still number 1 here today, and he's really starting to kick his game into a high gear. But look at Zegras not far behind him, 70 points in 94 games. So on a point per game basis, he's certainly able to rival his former teammate at the U.S. national team level. So I think over time, Zegras just might have a shot at taking him over here. Of course, Kirby Dach is next, 59 points in 152 games, whereas you have Kakko at 56 points in 155. I think both those players have had disappointing seasons and are, as you can see here, likely to slip in this redraft. You get Dylan Cozens, 50 points in 116 games, coming on strong, comparable point totals to Dach and Kakko, but he's played, in 35 to 40 less games. So to me, that's pretty good on his part. You get Moritz Seider, 41 points in 76 games. Once he hits an 82 game level here, we're looking at a 45 plus point season as a rookie, which is really solid. Going to be a top pair guy. Explains why he's so high here, and going to be a stud for Detroit. Nils Hoglander, 45 points in 116, not too shabby. In the middle of this draft. Caufield, 43 points, 22 goals in 71 games. Of course, that doesn't count his excellent playoff totals when he run to the Stanley Cup Finals. You get Alex Newhook next at 34 points in 72 games. Boldy, the same thing, 34 points in 40 games, which I think Boldy's going to continue to rise here. He's certainly putting up comparable point totals, but certainly in a lot less games. He's really grabbed that top 6 role with Minnesota, and the point totals on a point per game basis, if that continues, he'll be rising up this draft really fast. You get Philip Tomasino in Nashville next, 29 points in 70 games. Arthur Kaliev, 26 points in 76 games. Not bad compared to where they were drafted here. Podkolzin, 25 points in 73 games. Krebs is 23 points in 57 games. Then you have Connor McMichael, 18 points, and Byram at 17 points. But Byram, in his case, only played 44 NHL games. So now that we've seen the original order, we've taken a quick look at their performance here so far. Now let's do the new draft. As of today, I would have the 2019 first overall draft selection still being Jack Hughes going to the New Jersey Devils. I think after all this time, Jack Hughes is still not found his ceiling. He's still progressing, still has room to grow. Unfortunately, this year, his season was cut short due to injury. Had missed time earlier in the year as well, but he certainly had a major breakthrough in his production and was having an excellent season. So I do think Jack Hughes will hit that high ceiling potential that he was suspected to have when he was being drafted. So to me, as of today at least, Jack Hughes remains number one. But I do think longer term, there's a couple of these players that could certainly give him a run for his money for that distinction. And if we do this a few years down the road, it'll be interesting to see if that ever changes, at least in my opinion. Number 2 overall, the New York Rangers would now select Trevor Zegras. Can you imagine the dynamic Zegras on that Ranger team, who's obviously, coming out of a rebuild, going into the playoffs now, obviously much more competitive. We saw good progress last year, and then this year again, big progress, taking them into the playoffs. Zegras would certainly be a big help for their cap situation right now, given that he would still be on an ELC for another season. Of course, Zegras is in his second year, but certainly putting up tremendous points, tremendous skill, and really tearing things up in Anaheim. And to me right now, outside of Hughes, he is the most established and most distinct player in this draft so far. Like I said, I think long term, he can give Hughes a run for his money to be the best player in this draft, but time will tell. Number 3, we had Chicago selecting, and now I'd have them picking Moritz Seider, especially considering where everything is at in the draft. Kirby Dach still has potential to kind of regain that selection, I think, long term as the Blackhawks go through this rebuild. But in my opinion, Dach started strong but has slipped in his development. So Seider's come on real strong, is likely going to be the Rookie of the Year this year. Certainly put up his time playing another season after being drafted in Europe. And then, of course, played some time in the American Hockey League and now comes on to the NHL. Certainly Detroit has, I think, managed his development here a little bit better. And he's really looking like he's going to be a real solid stud top pair defenseman for the Red Wings for a long time. And it's usually, you can make an argument for a D-man or a center to be that, higher ranked player in the draft because of the intangibles that they bring to the table. But in this case, Seider to me is just way ahead of the curve when it compares to Dach, at least as of today. At number 4 overall, I would now have the Avalanche selecting Cole Caufield, who went 15th to Montreal. Caufield to me was a bit of a steal at 15. I know that earlier this season it kind of looked like maybe he wasn't going to pan out to the level that many thought, and a lot of people were starting to question his ability, but I personally didn't. I knew over time with the right changes there that he would find his game. I mean, we saw what he did in last year's playoffs, and to me, that was no fluke. The playoffs are an even tougher beast to perform in, and the fact that he was scoring it the way he was, playing the way he was, getting the big goals in overtime, and just the way he played with Nick Suzuki, I was like, that will be reignited at some point. We all have slumps in in our life, and certainly NHL players are no different than that. Whereas especially in their younger years, it's quite common. So Caufield, to me, based on where he's played recently and plus the playoffs, we've seen what he's capable of. And right now, I'd have him ranked as the 4th best player in this draft. At number 5 overall, I would now go with Dylan Cozens. Of course, Dylan Cozens right now would be moving up a few spots based on this. I mean, obviously, Caufield is one of the bigger risers from the early first-round picks for sure. But certainly number 5, which originally went to the LA Kings, Alex Turcotte, really is going to kind of get himself caught in a situation where he's in a deep prospect pool and just hasn't progressed the way that LA had hoped for. They ended up taking Quinton Byfield, the year later, and they just have a lot of guys playing ahead of him right now. So as much as he was drafted with a lot of potential, and I still think that's there, I don't think there's any reason to call Alex Turcotte a bust at this point. Dylan Cozens has solidified himself in Buffalo and has proven to be a real solid NHL player with something that's only going to continue to get better here as the years move forward. Now, next up in the number 6 spot, we have the Red Wings, and of course, I had them originally taking Mo Seider, which is not a big surprise, but he's not there now because he went higher. Now that we know all this information about him, they would now select Matthew Boldy, who originally went to Minnesota, obviously down further in the draft. Boldy has proven to be a real solid top 6 forward here for the Minnesota Wild here as of late. Like, his point totals per game are one of the best we've seen here in this draft so far. He hasn't played a ton, but this year especially, he's really broke through. But a big reason why we've seen guys like Kevin Fiala kind of get a resurgence here as of late and really put, like I said, just kind of really rounded out the top 6 for Minnesota. For the big part of the reason why they're having such a strong year, and having Boldy continue to develop the way he has will be huge for the Wild here moving forward. Now at number 7, I now have Kirby Dach going, who originally went number 3. Of course, he would basically be swapping spots here and taking the spot of Dylan Cozens in Buffalo. Now, of course, like I said, Kirby Dach's a big center iceman, a ton of potential, right shot. I think that really the development is slowed down, but I don't see any reason why it can't be reignited here. His draft plus 1 year was pretty solid. Things have slowed down since, but that team has gone through a lot as well, and you have to wonder if once it goes through some more changes, or if he were to be moved or something to that effect, if you would see him kind of bounce back and get the development program going again to the point that he would, look like the center iceman we thought he would be. Next up, we have a number 8. I have Bowen Byram. Now, originally this was an Oilers pick where they selected Philip Broberg. Of course, Broberg still might project to be a decent NHL defenseman, but at this point, between playing in Europe and in minors, hasn't really seen a lot of NHL action. Byram, to me, is certainly the stronger defenseman, and I have him slipping in this draft only because there would be injury concerns. When you see players coming out of junior, oftentimes if there are injury concerns, like we saw in this draft, for example, with Peyton Krebs, who was coming off ACL surgery, you know that teams are going to be a little bit hesitant or reluctant, knowing they already have that, on their record. And certainly it's no different than Byram after having multiple issues with concussions. Teams would shy away, but he's only going to drop so far because the talent is just too hard to pass up here. But to me, Bowen Byram on the Oilers would be a lethal defenseman back there, along with like Bouchard and Nurse, etc. Their blue line quite dynamic for many years to come. Now, at number 9, the Anaheim Ducks would be selecting, and Trevor Zegras would not be on the board anymore. So now they would go with current Avalanche youngster Alex Newhook. Now, Newhook to me is still a real solid player. Of course, played some college hockey before making the jump to the NHL. Newhook is still looking for more opportunity, and I think the only reason why Newhook's numbers aren't better is because of where he plays in the Avalanche lineup. There's certainly a lot of big-time superstars ahead of him in the depth chart, until things change in our roster or he ends up on another team or something, it's going to be tough for him to really solidify himself as a higher ranked player on top 6 role on a consistent basis, but due to cap reasons, that's likely going to happen here in the next year or two. And I think when that does happen, we will see his career really take a major step forward. But to me, Newhook's still a really good player, and the only reason he's not better is because of the depth in Colorado. Now, I have the former number 2 overall pick, Kaapo Kakko, now coming in at number 10, who would go to Vancouver in this case, who originally selected Vasily Podkolzin. But given the fact that Kakko was dropped in the draft, they would see that as a major opportunity here to take a player that they didn't think was going to be available. So Kakko would now go to Vancouver. And of course, Kakko's career's had a slow start. He's had a lot of injuries. You could question where he's been used in the lineup a little bit as well. And right now is not really panning out like a number 2 pick would. Now, you could make an argument here that the slow start to Kakko's career will be helpful when it comes to salary cap purposes. The Rangers are going to be tight up against it like many NHL teams here going into this offseason. And they're going to have some tough decisions to make in re-signing Kakko, who's expiring here after completing his ELC. Won't be all that expensive given the limited production we've seen here so far. But in this redraft, Vancouver would not pass up the opportunity to take the Finnish player. At number 11, we have Nils Hoglander, who originally, of course, was a Canuck pick himself. Podkolzin was the original number 10. Hoglander was down at number 40 with their next selection. Of course, this number 11 pick originally belonged to the Coyotes, who took Victor Soderstrom. But Hoglander, to me, is a much more established player and would be a much better fit playing a higher role in Arizona. I mean, consider where he plays in Vancouver, and their depth is way better than the Coyotes. Hoglander will likely be playing top-line minutes in Arizona with Clayton Keller and getting a good look there and likely really accelerating his offensive output. At number 12, we have Arthur Kaliev. Of course, originally this was the Matt Boldy pick to the Wild. Kaliev to the Los Angeles Kings has been a tremendous pickup. Of course, he went as low as 33 here in the original draft. There were some concerns over a few things to him and when this draft first took place, but he's overcome that. And like I said, look at Alex Turcotte, who went so early in the draft at number 5, hasn't really had much of a sniff at the NHL, very limited action, whereas Kaliev has been playing quite regularly and thriving. So it goes to show you that it's, sometimes your later picks can be just as strong. At number 13, we now have Peyton Krebs. This was originally the Florida Panthers selection, selecting Spencer Knight. At this point, Spencer Knight's been a tremendous young goalie. He's had his ups and downs a little bit. Certainly spent his time in the minors, played some college hockey before making the jump to the NHL. And the only reason I really have Florida going in a different direction here is just because of that long-term contract to Sergei Bobrovsky. I always found it puzzling how they had Bobrovsky to this mega long-term deal and then selected Knight. I mean, obviously, they had other goalie prospects in the system, which they've since moved on from as well. There's nobody else really as a young goalie in the system that can really give Knight a challenge at this point. But, at this point, like I said, Bobrovsky is going to be the main guy there. He's got a no move, making $10 million. It's going to be hard for Knight to really, take on a starting role. So to me, I think there's maybe a better spot for him, and that's actually going to be the next spot in the draft, which is number 14, which originally belonged to the Flyers, and I have them selecting Spencer Knight next. Of course, like I said, there's no reason to doubt Knight's abilities at this point. I only have him dropping in the draft due to organizational depth, and I just think there's a better fit here. You can even make an argument that he could have went a few spots higher as well. Other certain teams here could have went for him, like even Buffalo or even the Rangers or any of these guys, but a lot of these teams, at the time at least, it looked like their goaltending was in a decent spot that they wouldn't want to risk a high first-round pick on the young goalie. It's not something you see a lot, but Philadelphia, I think, would be that team. I know they have Carter Hart, but Carter Hart's been inconsistent as well, and to have a Hart-Knight duo here would be a tremendous pickup. I mean, Cam York still establishing himself as a decent young defenseman in the NHL. Probably get more of an opportunity next year as well. But to me, I think the Flyers could really benefit from having a more solid goaltending tandem here for the future. Next up at number 15, which was originally the pick of the Montreal Canadiens, I have them selecting Philip Tomasino. Originally went number 24th overall to the Nashville Predators. Of course, Tomasino is a pretty solid offensive player. There's some other people here that they could have went with as well, like a Vasily Podkolzin, but I think Tomasino kind of fits the team there a little bit better, and has just been a slightly more established right now in my opinion, here at the NHL level. Certainly lots of other prospects that, like I said, that are going to continue to do well and continue to get NHL experience and likely continue to kind of work their way up here in the rankings from this original 2019 NHL draft. So, of course, as I said, this is where I feel things would be redone as of today, but the information changes on the daily here at the NHL level as these players continue to play and their draft stock either goes up or down. And, of course, we get a better trajectory here for their overall careers. And it's just fun to look back as an exercise to say, you know, if we had a do-over, what would things be? Just the what if sometimes are fun and interesting to take a look at here when it comes to these drafts. So certainly let me know your thoughts. If you were picking again here and redoing this NHL draft, which players do you think would be the biggest risers and falls amongst their draft stock, and some players that you might find very interesting to be on some different teams if this was redone. So let me know all your thoughts and we'll discuss down in the comment section. Stay tuned. There could be some more of these coming up here from other draft years in the coming days as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.